In December 2023, I went on a massive trip around Asia, and I had so much fun. Amy and I flew to Hong Kong and stayed there for 6 nights. Then I headed off to Shanghai, where I met up with my friend Edwin and stayed for 5 nights. Finally, I flew to Seoul, where I met up with some of my other high school friends for 10 nights, before heading back to Sydney. Yup, it was a pretty big adventure. Now, I have a lot to say about my experiences in East Asia. Suffice to say, I was blown away by their transit. All 3 cities are simply mind-blowing. Their transit systems are efficient, fast and frequent, and yet have their own unique flaws that I think are worth delving into. So, this video is the beginning of a 3-part series I'm going to do about each city that I visited. So let's start with Hong Kong. It's one of the densest cities in the world, one of the most geographically challenging, and has one of the most impressive transit systems in the world, in spite of all of it. In this video, I'll be giving you my thoughts on the Hong Kong MTR. And stick around till the end, where we'll take a journey to the location of the formerly densest neighborhood in the entire world, and also the location of perhaps one of the most iconic closed airports in the world. I'm Sharath, and welcome to Building Beautifully. Before I continue, massive shout out to my monthly Ko-fi supporters. Please do consider supporting me over on Ko-fi if you can. Also, please subscribe if you haven't already, and do be sure to check out the rest of my channel, your go-to YouTube destination for all things city planning, after the video. Amy and I arrived in Hong Kong on the 15th of December 2023. The airport was beautiful, obviously. Sorry if I say this wrong. Chek Lap Kok Airport opened in 1998 and is located around 34 kilometers from Hong Kong CBD. Many of you probably know about the Hong Kong airport that came before it, but we'll get to that in a bit. This was the perfect chance for Amy and I to try out the Airport Express train, which takes passengers from the airport directly all the way to Hong Kong Island, the business hub of the country, as well as making a few stops on the way. Brilliant. The Western Sydney airport line could never. But Amy and I were alone for the first time in a new country, and so we decided to play it safe and just take a taxi. Lucky for us, Hong Kong Airport goes to extreme lengths to make sure tourists like us aren't scammed. Helpers literally ask you where you're going before you get into a taxi, and then print a receipt with the estimated fare of your trip, so the driver can't scam you. Hong Kong is dense. Very dense. That was immediately obvious just looking out the window on our taxi ride. Plenty of Australians comment that they don't want their city to become like Hong Kong, and honestly, going to Hong Kong, I can't help but laugh a bit.
We don't want the people of Hong Kong looking over to Sydney going, oh my god, they are way overdeveloped.
No one from Hong Kong would ever call Dulwich Hill overdeveloped, no matter what gets built there. It would just never be able to be on Hong Kong's level. Hong Kong is dense to a level that Australians would never accept, and honestly, that's fair enough. I agree it's too much. The buildings are really tall and nowhere near as aesthetic as the Australian or even Singaporean apartments that I'm used to. I wouldn't want that for Sydney. I want more tasteful yet still dense development. But don't worry, we'll never get to Hong Kong's point to begin with, because we just don't have the same geographical challenges as them. I don't think any city does. Hong Kong is so mountainous. Surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, only about 25% of Hong Kong is actually developed land. Amy and I stayed in Yau Ma Tei, in this tiny hotel room. And I mean tiny. This was literally a shoebox in all the senses of the word. It is a very small room, isn't it?
Yes.
It's tiny. That's the view. And this is the bed.
Wait, but take yourself to your room.
It's so small. The average home in Hong Kong is only 45 meters squared, about 4 times smaller than the average home in Australia, and about 3 times smaller than the average Australian apartment. For the record though, our hotel room was only 11 meters squared, so Hong Kong was definitely a little bit scary at first. Everyone spoke Cantonese, although Amy knows Cantonese luckily. We definitely started to adjust as the trip went on, and we ended up having a lot of fun. But hey, it's time to get into Hong Kong's MTR. It's a 99 station, 174 kilometer system that allows access to almost all of the country. Looking at a map of the system, it's easy to not be that impressed. After all, Sydney's rail network has 181 stations, over 405 kilometers of track, which sounds far more impressive. Also, the Hong Kong system looks a little bit chaotic, not as organized as other cities. That's entirely due to Hong Kong's complex geography, of course. But don't be deceived by the simplicity of the MTR. It punches well above its weight. Sydney Trains moved 259 million passengers in the 2022-23 financial year. The Hong Kong MTR moved 1.488 billion passengers in that same time. A shocking 81% of trips in Hong Kong are made by public transit, the highest mode share in the world. How on earth does Hong Kong manage to achieve this with what is a fairly modest rail network? Well, having used the MTR for 5 days, I reckon there's a few obvious reasons. For starters, the simple fact that only 25% of Hong Kong is even developed to begin with makes it easier to build a rail system that truly can cover almost all of the country. Of course, we were just tourists visiting for a few days, but it truly felt like we could take the MTR anywhere. Next is the insane frequencies. At the stations we visited, there seemed to be a train no less than every 5 minutes, and often even more frequent than that. Seriously, Hong Kong's off-peak frequencies are better than most of Australia's on-peak frequencies. The stations are also massive. The Tsim Sha Tsui, East Tsim Sha Tsui mega station honestly just felt like it went forever, and there were people everywhere. There seemed to be no such thing as a quiet station in Hong Kong, which wasn't really the case in Shanghai or Seoul. Oh, and everything in the Hong Kong MTR moved so fast. The escalators were fast, the people were fast, every MTR was absolutely packed. Good luck sitting down. Seriously, it was packed at pretty much every hour I can remember. This isn't really a failure though. You'll still get on the train after all. Rather, it's a testament to how successful Hong Kong's MTR is. We in Sydney are too obsessed with sitting down on transit, and I'm very guilty of this, but people don't mind standing as much when a transit system is fast, reliable, and frequent. But most of what I've discussed isn't really anything special. No, what makes Hong Kong truly special are the insane cross-platform interchanges. Cross-platform interchanges exist in Chatswood and Glenfield in Sydney, but they're certainly not all that common in Australia. Let's delve into what exactly a cross-platform interchange is, taking the Yau Ma Tei Mong Kok Prince Edward interchange as by far the most impressive example. This is a massive 3-station interchange between the Tsuen Wan line and Kwun Tong line. At Prince Edward, the platforms are organised such that you can walk across the platform and switch to the other line in the opposite direction. At Mong Kok, it's the same but in the same direction. Yau Ma Tei is just a normal interchange between the same lines. What this means is that when transferring between lines, instead of needing to walk all the way up an escalator and then all the way down another one, all you need to do is get off at the right station and just walk to the other side of the platform. And no matter who you are, if you're interchanging between these lines, there will be a station in this interchange that satisfies your transfer. Brilliant. Hong Kong has a lot of cross-platform interchanges that are similar to this. Another ease-of-use feature of the MTR was the Octopus card, which is Hong Kong's transport card. You can just top it up with Australian money, and you can put the card in your iPhone or Android wallet. I literally was just able to tap my watch on the reader. I didn't even need to open the card on the watch first. The Octopus card is actually a universal card in Hong Kong that you can use to pay at most places, so that's pretty handy. As a tourist, I really found the exit signs in Hong Kong to be super useful on the MTR. Finding the right exit in the massive labyrinth of stations was easy due to these clear signs. Oh, and it was so cool how well integrated shopping centres were with the MTR. Although we did accidentally stumble into this rather strange and quiet shopping centre. This place is actually just completely quiet. Escalator isn't even running. Isn't that weird? It's 9 AM on a Tuesday. What's going on? The MTR is so efficient that the roads were so much quieter than you'd expect for a city of 7.5 million. Honestly, they sometimes just felt outright empty. I didn't see all that many traffic jams. Seoul could never. You'll see. Another impressive thing about Hong Kong's MTR is the unique way that it is integrated with real estate. There's very few rail systems around the world that run at a profit, Australia included. But the MTR does. It made a $1.8 billion profit in 2021. This is largely due to what is dubbed the rail plus property model. Before building lines, the MTR buys the land off the government based on its value before the line is built, then sells that land off at a premium to developers based on its value after the line is built. This largely allows the MTR to fund its own construction and operations without government help, and while still managing to pocket a profit. This is value capture taken to a whole nother level. To be clear, we probably shouldn't be taking too much advice from Hong Kong when it comes to real estate, because they're actually the most unaffordable real estate market in the world. They're the only city that has housing more unaffordable than Sydney, depending on which metric you use. This is largely due to land shortages and the inefficient way that housing is built in Hong Kong. I'll link you to a video on that in the top right that explains it far better than I ever could. Hong Kong Island has a very extensive tramway network with 120 stations across 30 kilometers of track. Uniquely, it exclusively operates double-decker trams, probably the only system in the world to do so. The tramway even goes through the famous Chun Yung Street markets. It's very cool. I'm sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing every single word in this video. Hong Kong's buses were also really impressive. They featured these large monitors that clearly denoted all the route stops and where the next stop was. Indeed, when I had to leave Hong Kong for Shanghai, Amy and I didn't take the Airport Express since we weren't staying that close to any of its stations. Instead, we just took a bus, which had its own dedicated luggage space and these really comfortable seats for the long journey to Blvcknoize Airport. There's also these light buses, which they run on less patronaged routes. Would love to see this implemented in Australia. So yeah, that's a rundown of Hong Kong's transit system. But we're not done yet. It's time to explore the Kowloon walled city. The Kowloon walled city was an infamous neighborhood that was excessively dense, home to 50,000 people at its peak, despite being only 2.6 hectares. For context, Mossman in Sydney has a population of 28,000 in an area of 870 hectares, over 300 times larger. During much of the last century, the neighborhood wasn't technically part of British Hong Kong. Rather, it was an enclave of China for complex reasons that I won't get into right now, and therefore it was largely ungoverned. Consequently, it was a breeding ground for shady businesses, crime, drug abuse, and prostitution. It expanded without any government intervention, growing 40 stories into the sky, looking like a haphazard Jenga threatening to collapse at any moment. Suffice to say, this wasn't built beautifully. Get it? Because I'm building beautifully? That's the name of the channel. I'm so funny. That joke never gets old. The government finally intervened and demolished the city in the 1990s. There's a plethora of videos that explore the history of the city. I'll link a short one in the top right. But a lot of these don't explore what the city looks like now. Amy and I visited and we were frankly blown away. The 14 stories that once towered into the sky were long gone, replaced with the Kowloon Walled City Park. This is a beautiful city park that is designed to look like a Jiangnan garden of the early Qing dynasty, which is when the Kowloon Walled City was first built. In the center of the park is the Yamen building. This is an administrative building that was built as part of the walled city and is the only remaining old Qing building. Remains of the South Gate, which had long ago served as the entrance to the city, also remain. It was surreal to finally get to go visit the park. I've been obsessed with the Kowloon Walled City for years, and I'm not joking. It was like the main thing I wanted to visit in Hong Kong. You can ask Amy. It's just crazy that once upon a time, 50,000 people lived here in this small space. Now, the Kowloon Walled City was actually limited to only 14 stories for a very specific reason. It was because it was located right next to Hong Kong's old airport, Kai Tak Airport. And that segues us perfectly into where Amy and I went next. For any older viewers who ever flew into Hong Kong, Kai Tak Airport probably still remains in your memory, because it was perhaps one of the most crazy airports to land at. Basically, it was surrounded by mountains and residential buildings, so planes had to make these crazy maneuvers just to land at the airport, involving really sharp turns. The airport was open during the peak of the jumbo jet, leading to some truly iconic photos of 747s landing at the airport, set amongst the concrete jungle of Hong Kong. One of the final maneuvers pilots had to make before landing involved sighting Checkerboard Hill, which had a distinct and iconic red and white pattern on it. Amy and I actually went and visited the hill. That's right, it's still there, you can still visit it. Naturally, it was abandoned when Kai Tak closed, but it was restored and repainted during the pandemic as a monument to the original airport. Despite its pretty recent restoration, it was surprisingly hard to get there. It was at the top of a pretty steep hill, at the end of a really hidden makeshift path with no direction signs whatsoever, and there was no one else there, which I have to say is a very unnerving experience in a crowded city like Hong Kong. Once pilots sighted this hill, they'd make a really sharp 47-degree turn to line up with the single Kai Tak runway and land. Given all the photos you've now seen, the technical difficulty of landing at Kai Tak and its sheer proximity to the dense urban core of Hong Kong, it's probably no surprise that the airport was closed in 1998 and replaced with Chek Lap Kok Airport. The former airport has now slowly been redeveloped, and it's now home to Hong Kong's cruise terminal and several apartment developments. They even opened a runway park for people to actually walk on part of the former runway and even see an old former plane. But this is where things get interesting. Amy and I arrived at the park and there was no one there. At all. The park was really overgrown, obviously unkempt, and part of the Kai Tak sign was just outright missing. It was really unnerving because nothing online had indicated the park would look like this. It felt like we had stumbled onto an abandoned runway, even though it was meant to be a restored version of an abandoned runway. Well, we finally found this sign and realized that the park had been closed since the 22nd of February 2022. Quite the date they chose. I'd have to imagine this has to do with COVID, because February 2022 is when COVID started spiraling out of control in Hong Kong. God knows how we were even able to get into the park. We actually passed security guards on our way, but they didn't even attempt to stop us. Anyways, that was an unexpectedly unsettling experience, but at least it had really cool views of the city. Alright, that's the end of my recap of Hong Kong. Phew, that was a lot. Hope you all enjoyed that. Next time, we'll be talking about Shanghai, a city with by far the most expansive metro system I have ever ridden on. Seriously, it's hard to believe they built such a ridiculously massive system in just 30 years. And you'll get to hear my thoughts on my first time ever on high-speed rail. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.